Hi, I'm Fiona, and welcome to innerVIVID, the project that asks questions about life, being human, and other tricky things. And speaking of tricky things, how do you manage endings? Had any good ones lately? Like an amazing didn't see that coming ending of a movie, or a great new job or a new home? Are endings for you a chance for new beginnings, or maybe a time of sadness about the change and the loss? You know, these are all trick questions because us humans deal with many kinds of endings throughout our complex lifetimes. There are as many endings as there are questions. So innerVIVID Theme 6 is all about endings. We're getting into some interesting territory here. And after hearing some of these conversations, we reckon, want to get a chat going about spirituality? Ask someone about endings. For instance, every culture in the world has ideas about what death is all about. That's a pretty significant ending for sure. So, just a heads up, please look after yourself when you're watching the episodes in this theme. The ideas of death are troubling for some, so if you need some next level care and consideration, check in with a good friend or call an organisation that you trust. To get it started, we asked some folks about their experiences of endings. Some spoke of big life changes like jobs ending and moving house. Others spoke of the death of a beloved pet, and still others, the loss of a precious human. Let's see what they all have to say. What's the easiest finishing up you've had in your life?
Yes, leaving South Africa to explore the world. Yeah. That was quite easy. Yeah. Partly because we got accepted quite quickly and we were ready to go overseas and start a new life.
Well, actually, the easiest finishing up I had was walking away from my lifetime profession of clinical psychology. Although I miss some of the social aspects of my colleagues, both in the community and the professional community, I have replaced them in retirement. So that was actually quite easy.
I think the day that I wasn't very happy with some moral choices of a boss, so I unfortunately just walked out.
What's been one big ending in your life?
My brother dying at 45 here in Australia in 2004. That was huge. My younger brother. You don't expect that.
No, that's not really the way it's supposed to happen, is it?
Well, one that I've been reflecting on a lot coming back to the Gold Coast was leaving the Gold Coast over 8 years ago to move to Brisbane. And it's amazing what's the same and what's different in returning. But I can say that what was once home for me for over 24 years doesn't feel like home anymore. I am really at home in Brisbane. So yeah, that was a big ending. Gold Coast as home. Now I have new home.
The easiest finishing up. Yeah, giving up jeggings. That was one. No, it was a short-lived romance of about a week. I don't do endings very well. I tend to quietly slip out the door early because I find endings so difficult. But I've come to realise as I've grown older that actually doesn't do justice to the relationships you're in at the time. And you also can't turn around and wonder why no one calls you. So I'm slowly growing and learning about how to do endings with a bit more grace and a bit more courage.
Jen's last idea is such a challenge. Just how do we navigate endings with grace and courage? Death is such a big deal, isn't it? In this theme, we'll keep coming back to the significance of death a few times over. But to start us off, ever heard of a near-death experience? We sure have. I have to say mostly in movies, to be honest, but we wanted to know what others had heard too. Here's our question.
Near-death experiences, what are those about?
I've never had one. I'm kind of jealous of people that do because it sounds like a really great story and a great experience because they've come back to tell us about it. I have, however, had the privilege of sitting with many people as they have passed from life into death and whatever their next journey is for them. And I do count that as a true privilege. I'm always interested to hear about near-death experiences because it's something I haven't experienced myself, and because we're all curious about that, aren't we? It's part of our very essence of being a human being. If life is about more than just being born and dying, then life is about wondering about what comes next, and people that have had a near-death experience are the closest we've got to telling us about that.
I think they're probably about us trying to make sense of what happens after death, because none of us actually know for sure. Some people trust that there's something, other people think there's nothing, but perhaps there's something deep in our subconscious that really wants to know and really wants some certainty about that. And so perhaps it's our bodies doing something in that place to reassure us about what might happen.
Well, from kind of how I understand it, is there is a commonality that emerges when people who have been very close to death but have not completely died, have made a recovery, will often share a similar story about what they've experienced. And so there are a lot of testimonies of people who are sharing stories about what they felt happened to them as they came to very close to death. And I think there's an interest in that. You know, there's a curiosity to explore that. You know, what are they sensing? What are they seeing? Is there something that across cultures are having the same experience, across religious backgrounds? So for me, I think it's an interesting area to explore. Can we ever have a definitive answer? Possibly not, but you know, not a bad thing to be challenged and to think about it and to maybe question what that means for us in terms of looking at our own mortality.
The whole notion of a near-death experience is an experience, I think, that helps you reevaluate life. It actually pushes back into where you are at the moment and say, what is this precious life that you've got now? It is quite possible that, in a funny way, every day could be your last day. And in truth, one day will be your last day. And does that insight help you live your current life better? I think there's a possibility that if you frame it correctly, it can. It can help you say, well, this is a gift today. This is a day that I want to actually give thanks for the beauty, the wonder, the sense, the smells all around me in this world around me. And I want to treat people in a better way. Imagine if I wasn't going to see them again. Let me treat them a little bit better. That to me is about how you can make some sense of that kind of framing.
Ultimately, I don't really know. I suppose one way to talk about it is that they could be about people confronting in a very intimate way how fragile and fleeting life is, and that in relation to experiencing the fragility and fleetingness of life, what really matters comes into focus in some way. You know, and there's neuroscientific theories about what happens to the brain as it nears its end, and the brain produces certain kinds of chemical experiences and chemical reactions, and I'm sure that's bound up in these kinds of experiences. But on a more existential level, it's something about what it means to sum up one's life, and how near the end of life there's something about us that wants to grasp the meaning of it all or the totality of it all, and somehow these experiences are about something about that.
I was traveling in Eastern Europe at the time, and I was traveling on my own, and it was snowy, and I was exploring this citadel, and I was like, oh, go on this little path, and then this path got narrower and narrower, and the slope got steeper and steeper, and of course snow, and I'm not used to traveling in snow, and I slipped, and I was like, oh, this is gonna end badly, and I just remember just being this intense, oh, am I, just this real, how do I describe it? Like this physical sense of oh no, it was literally the oh no. But also just your brain starts racing, being what happens if I do fall off? If I survive, but also if I survive, do I come out unscathed? I'm in a foreign country. Do I end up in a hospital? Like, how does this work? And thankfully I didn't fall off the slope, and I'm here today to talk about it. But also what was interesting after is that the sheer sense of relief afterwards. Like, suddenly there's this interesting high you get where you're like, oh my goodness, I'm alive, I'm here. We're not always comfortable with reminding ourselves that actually death is a part of our life and that it will come eventually. But also I think near-death experiences remind us that actually it's not in our control. As the world, we really like to lean into the idea that maybe we can control when we die, right? And that, you know, if we eat well, if we do the right things, and, you know, we follow all the life hacks that are out there, that we will get a say in when our life ends. And the thing is, that's not true. It's just not. And I think near-death experiences can really remind us of that. And I think it can also remind us to really live the life that we want to live right here and now.
My dad's a minister in the church, and I used to be fascinated as a teenager when Dad and some of his minister friends used to get together and tell what I used to call priest ghost stories. And often they would come up with these sort of experiences of something other than the natural that has happened with a person close to their death. And so since that time, I've always been open to the idea that there is something that happens to us that we just can't quite explain when we get close to death. The commonality that I've heard just gives me the inkling that there's something that can happen to somebody who doesn't die but is close to death, but also something happens to us in the dying process that we just can't explain.
It seems to me that the mystery surrounding the end of life means that people really can experience a nearly there zone. What do you think? But it is clear that there's a general curiosity about death and what comes next, and that when there's a reminder that our lives can end, it can focus our attention and get us living life more intently, more intensely. How do you feel about this topic? Remember to take care of yourself and manage those big feelings. Reach out and have a chat with a trusted friend about life, endings, and how we can live well. And look out for the next episode all about how we understand what comes next.
Closest you've ever come to dying?
Well, as somebody who's died 3 times before, I've come pretty close several times. So the first time when I was about 3, I drowned to death. I came back again. Then I was around 10, I got burnt to death and I came back again. And then when I was about 15, I got electrocuted to death and came back again. So yeah, I'm trying to explore what other ways could possibly end me but not work yet. There you go.
I have no words. What's your response to that? Does it alter the way you live?
Not really. I think that it's meant that, so I never really had any out-of-body experiences where people have had like that. I've never, not that I can recall, had that type of thing, but I don't know, it's just something that's happened to me several times, and maybe there is a higher purpose to my life. Maybe there's that.